Okay, so I wanted to share just a quick story with you guys, and there's a blog post about this link, and it's important to me because it's something I write about in my book, What It Means to Be a Man, and that is the messages that we send to young boys at an early age. So the other night, my son and I, and our whole family actually, were out riding bicycles. And it's one of those nights where it was late, it was 8 o'clock, and he should have been asleep by then already. So, number one, I'm kind of irresponsible as a parent at that point, right? So he's overtired and he just won't stop whining and whining to his sister, and we're riding the bike, and it's just not fun. And so I say to him, if you cry again, I'm going to take you back home. That's what I say. And literally, like 2 or 3 minutes later, we're riding the bicycle, and he takes this huge crash and falls over his handlebars, and he's under the bike. And before I can actually get to them, he looks up at me with tears in his eyes, laying under his bike, and he says, "Are you taking me home now?" Just like really sad, just disappointed, crying. And instantly my heart sunk totally, because what I realized in that moment, that he heard me earlier say, if you cry again, we're going home. And so he has this huge crash. He's in pain. He's crying, and he thinks because he's crying, that's it. It's over. And I realized that I kind of sent him the message that it's not okay to have feelings, to have emotions, to cry when you're sad, or to cry when you're hurt, or cry when you're having a bad day. And if I was a better parent that moment earlier, I would have not used the word crying with him. I would have sat him down and just said, "Hey, Hudson, if you keep whining with your sister like this, we're just going to have to end the bike ride and go home." But instead I said, "Stop crying," essentially. That's what he heard. He heard the message, "Stop crying." Um, and so when he was laying there and he looked at me with tears in his eyes and he said, "Are we going to go home now?" I hugged him. He's in my neck and he's got tears coming out. And I was like, "Hudson, it is always okay for you to cry. It is always okay for you to cry. When you're sad, when you're hurt, when you have a bad day, it is always okay for you to cry. I want you to know that." And I got him back on his bike and we rode around for a while and we had a good time. And then later that night we got home and read some bedtime stories with him. And then I laid in bed with him at night, which is usually I do. We lay with one of the kids, take turns laying with different kids. And I told him after he was calm, I said again, "Hudson, it is always okay for you to cry, especially when you're sad and you're having a bad day. It's okay for you to have emotions." And I said, what I just don't want, and what's not helpful is when you just whine at your sister a lot and when you guys argue, but that's different, okay? It's always okay for you to cry. And I tell you that message because in the book I write about some of the research that Terence Real, author and counselor and psychologist said, or he actually writes about in his book. There's a great book by his called I don't want to talk about it. And it's about men and it's about their depression. And what he says in the book often is that boys at an early age hear a different message from girls. But in fact, actually, boys and girls, he says, are equally expressive as kids. Showing emotion, and sometimes boys show more emotion. But he said again, boys hear a different message. About on age 4 or 5, boys start hearing messages like "Stop crying," "Be a man," "Pick yourself up," "Don't be a wuss." And those are just some of the nicer things they hear. They hear some really horrible things, and they hear it from fathers and mothers and grandparents and coaches and pastors and people who mean well, but they send this message to a young boy that it's not okay to have feelings, to have emotions. And what Terence Real says that over time, boys learn that it's not safe to talk about how they feel. It's not safe to have a feeling. It's not safe to have emotion. And so those emotions get pushed down deep and they get buried deep. And they come out often in unhealthy ways. They come out through violence and anger. And they come out often on in sports, on the playing field, or in fighting, or in just numbing out in video games and violence there. They come out in just unhealthy ways, or porn. There's all kinds of ways they come out. Because we've essentially told boys over time it's not safe to talk about how you feel, and they have no outlet for it. And take a boy who's 4 or 5 and he hears that message over and over again. Eventually you have a man, you have an adult male who doesn't know how to identify what he's feeling. He doesn't know how to have a relationship with a person. He doesn't know how to express himself, to have emotions. And I work with tons of men. I've worked with thousands of men in ministry and in counseling, and I cannot tell you the number of men who tell me a story about the time their father or their mother or their grandparent or their coach said, "Hey, son, stop crying. Pick yourself up. One guy said, his father said to him, put those tears away. And I've had men in their 60s or 70s tell me they remember the time when they were 4, 5, or 6 and their father said that message. And they're telling me in session as they're crying about that and showing emotion, but they've learned it's not safe. In fact, I would say that even in marriage and relationships, that a lot of wives or women will actually be really uncomfortable if their husband expresses emotion. So the husband learns in marriage it's not okay to have an emotion. It's not okay to be sad. It's not okay to be, to have a bad day, to express that. And so even people who want men to express emotions often keep them from expressing emotions. And so I share that story with you because it was a huge reminder to me about I need to practice what I preach. And that is I work with tons of boys and tons of men, and I work with them to help them express how they feel and to have healthy relationship, not only with themselves and their emotions, but with other people. And I was just sad, man, when my son, I did not want to send him the message that it's never okay to cry. Because it is. It's okay to have a feeling. It's okay to have emotion. And I was devastated that he thought because he got hurt and was crying that I was going to be upset with him, right? And he tied it back to earlier. And he tied it back to earlier when I didn't use words correctly. And to be honest, that night we were riding the bikes, I was probably not handling my emotions very well either. I was tired. It had been a long day. We've all been there as parents. But this is just a reminder, man, if you have boys or you work with boys, be careful how you communicate to them. Be careful what you say. Because a boy who hears, stop crying, don't be a wuss, pick yourself up, will always remember that for the rest of his life. And that's how he will begin to operate when it comes to his emotions and his feelings. And so send the right message. Let them know that it's okay. It's safe to talk about how they feel. Anyways, it's something that I'm really passionate about, something I love to talk about, and I think it's really important. And I think, as Terrence Real says in his book, and I agree with him, that issue alone leads to a lot of the issues that men face in their life because they live in a culture where it's about being tough and you can't be vulnerable. Because if you're vulnerable, that is a weakness. And showing emotion for many men equals a weakness. Showing emotion for many women in a relationship with a man, if a man shows emotion for many women, they say it as a weakness as well. So men are stuck in many ways. So anyways, I want to encourage you to be the person who lets that boy, to let your son, to let your grandson know it's okay to express how you feel. It's okay to have emotions and to connect at that level with them. All right, enough off my soapbox today. Have a good day, guys.